My ex-husband's parents refused to acknowledge our daughter her entire life, until he died in combat. Just 48 hours later, they showed up demanding full custody. What I uncovered about their sudden obsession with her made me fight harder than I ever have in my life. Penny was just 8 years old when Evan tragically passed away in an IED explosion. Witnessing her quiet sobs into his carefully folded flag at the memorial service fractured something deep inside me. We had been separated for 2 years, yet Evan remained the most wonderful father Penny could have wished for, and his loss felt like half of our small family had vanished. What I truly did not anticipate was his parents, Richard and Patricia, appearing at my apartment merely 2 days after we laid their son to rest. They had never once visited Penny in her entire life, nor had they ever sent a birthday greeting or a holiday present. Throughout my marriage to Evan, they made it abundantly clear that I was not suitable for their esteemed son, and following our divorce, they behaved as if Penny simply did not exist. Yet, there they stood at my doorstep, dressed in expensive dark attire, with feigned expressions of concern, discussing Penny's future. Patricia moved through my small living space as though she were inspecting a crime scene, while Richard commented on the financial difficulties I must be experiencing. They presented Penny with a tablet that cost more than my entire month's groceries and began discussing extended visits to help her cope with her sorrow. The way they scrutinized every possession we owned made me feel deeply uneasy, but Penny was so heartbroken by her father's absence that she clung to any connection she could find to him. Within a week, they were collecting her from school without seeking my permission first. They enrolled her in an exclusive therapy program and frequently mentioned how much better Penny would fare in a private school setting. Even my own mother began to side with them. She was so impressed by their affluent lifestyle that she repeatedly told me I should be grateful for their willingness to assist. She had never encountered such wealth before. Suddenly, I was being labeled as selfish for not allowing them to completely transform Penny's life. I began working additional shifts to afford items that could rival their lavish gifts. However, each time Penny returned from their residence, she seemed more distant. She would speak of horseback riding lessons and potential trips to Europe, while I prepared her lunch in plastic containers. I felt as though I was losing my daughter, and everyone around me acted as if this was a positive development. The pivotal moment arrived as Penny's 9th birthday approached. I had been setting aside money for months to take her camping at the very spot where Evan had proposed to me, a place we had visited with Penny at least once annually. It was our cherished custom. Penny became excited, talking about roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under the night sky, just as we used to do with her father. But then Patricia declared that they had reserved a Disney cruise for the exact same weekend. She made remarks about camping being primitive, suggesting Penny deserved truly magical experiences. Richard continually stressed the considerable cost of the cruise and emphasized that it was a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. My mother immediately endorsed the cruise, telling Penny it was Disney and something she would remember forever. When I attempted to explain the significance of our camping tradition, Patricia interrupted me, stating that Evan was gone and it was time Penny moved on from the past. The most painful part was observing Penny's expression as she realized she had to make a choice. She began to cry and apologize, but ultimately said she wished to go to Disney. Unable to bear spending her birthday weekend alone, I drove 6 hours to my sister-in-law Veronica's home near the military base where Evan had been stationed. Veronica and her parents had never seen eye to eye, a common ground we shared. She allowed me to weep for hours as I confessed feeling like a failure as a mother and being unable to compete with their endless financial resources. Then Veronica mentioned something that caused me to freeze. She said Evan had visited about a month prior to his deployment and seemed quite distressed about an issue involving his parents. She disappeared into her closet and returned with a sealed envelope, clearly marked in Evan's own handwriting. Veronica's hands trembled as she presented it to me, stating, "Evan made me promise to give this to you if his parents ever tried anything with Penny." She recalled him constantly researching family finances and repeatedly saying they had never cared before. So why now? My heart pounded as I broke the seal, discovering bank statements, legal documents, and a handwritten letter from Evan. The very first item I noticed was Evan's life insurance policy, designating Penny as the sole beneficiary for $750,000. Evan's letter clarified everything. His parents had disowned him when he married me, believing I was beneath their social standing. However, it was his grandfather who possessed all the wealth and had paid for Evan's life insurance policy to safeguard his family, ensuring his parents would only learn of it after his passing. The crushing truth struck me forcefully. They were not grieving grandparents. They were opportunists who viewed Penny as a financial gain. Evan's documents also revealed that Richard's business was failing, and they were on the verge of bankruptcy. A few days later, my lawyer received preliminary custody paperwork, alleging I was financially unstable and emotionally unfit. The therapy sessions, it became clear, were intended to undermine my credibility. It was then that I fully grasped Penny was currently on the Disney cruise, entirely under their influence. My phone displayed a text from Patricia stating we needed to converse upon their return because Penny's future was at stake. I had only 2 days to prepare for a battle for my daughter. I gazed at Patricia's text message for the 100th time, pacing Veronica's living room. The words seared into my mind. Penny's future was at stake. My hands would not cease shaking as I once again spread Evan's documents across the coffee table. $750,000. That was Penny's perceived value to them. Veronica brought me coffee and sat beside me. She indicated one of the bank statements showing Richard's business had been hemorrhaging money for the past 18 months. The dates aligned perfectly. They had begun losing everything just before Evan's deployment, but they had concealed it effectively behind their country club facade. I contacted my lawyer, Catherine, but reached her voicemail. Then I attempted to call Penny's phone. It rang twice before Patricia's voice came through, dripping with false sweetness. She informed me Penny was at the kids' club, making new friends, and was unable to speak. I faintly heard Penny's voice in the background inquiring who was calling. Then came the distinct sound of a door closing before the line went dead. My stomach churned. They had my daughter on a ship in the middle of the ocean. I accessed Patricia's Facebook page on my phone. She had already uploaded dozens of photographs. Penny at the character breakfast, Penny by the swimming pool, Penny in a princess gown that likely cost more than my monthly rent. Every caption suggested this poor child was finally experiencing the childhood she deserved. The comments made me feel ill. Patricia's acquaintances gushed about what wonderful grandparents they were, how fortunate Penny was to have them step up after such a tragedy. One woman commented that it was beautiful to see them provide this child with opportunities her mother clearly could not. I hurled my phone across the room. Veronica retrieved it and returned it to me. She reminded me that losing my composure was precisely what they desired. She was correct. I needed to begin thinking like them now, calculating every move, documenting every detail. I started taking photographs of all Evan's documents, the insurance policy, the bank statements, his handwritten letter warning about his parents' true character. Then I noticed something I had overlooked previously, a sticky note in Evan's handwriting attached to one statement. It indicated Richard had requested a loan from him 2 weeks before deployment, which Evan had declined. My phone vibrated. Another text from Patricia. This one included a photograph of Penny embracing Mickey Mouse. The message stated that they needed to discuss Penny's living arrangements upon their return for her stability and future prospects. The threat was unmistakable. I spent the next hour researching custody law on Veronica's laptop. The sickening sensation in my stomach intensified with each article. Grandparents with financial means could present a compelling argument, especially if they could demonstrate the parent was struggling financially, which I was. Every extra shift I worked could be misrepresented as abandonment. Every instance I was late for pickup due to traffic could be twisted into neglect. Veronica's former husband, Nathan, called, needing her to care for their children. He had emergency training on base, and their usual sitter had canceled. Veronica looked at me apologetically, but I urged her to go. Family was paramount. After she departed, I sat alone with my racing thoughts. I attempted to call Penny again. This time, Richard answered. He stated Penny was napping after a busy day of activities. When I requested that she call me when she awoke, he said they would be at dinner, then a show. Perhaps tomorrow. His tone was so casual, as if denying me access to my daughter was perfectly reasonable. After ending the call, I noticed Patricia had uploaded more photographs. One depicted their suite on the ship. It was larger than my entire apartment. The caption mentioned how wonderful it was that Penny finally had adequate space to play. Another photograph showed Penny's vacation wardrobe laid out on the bed, designer clothing with the tags still attached. I scrolled through the comments again and froze. My own mother had commented on several photos. She wrote about how blessed Penny was to have grandparents who could provide such experiences, how these memories would endure a lifetime, how Patricia and Richard were angels for stepping in. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the third ring, sounding defensive already. I questioned her about her actions, commenting on those posts in such a manner. She claimed she was merely being polite and appreciative. When I attempted to explain the true situation, she cut me off. She said I was being paranoid and selfish, that good grandparents wanting to indulge their granddaughter was not a crime. I informed her about the insurance money, the bankruptcy, Evan's warnings. She fell silent for a moment, then remarked, even if that were true, wouldn't Penny be better off with people who could afford to give her everything? The betrayal struck me like a physical blow. My own mother had already chosen their side. After ending the call, I sat in Veronica's guest room, trying not to succumb to panic. They had isolated me perfectly, turned my family against me, documented me as unstable, presented themselves as saviors, all while holding my daughter captive on a cruise ship where I could not reach her. I opened my laptop again and began to record everything. Every interaction, every veiled threat disguised as concern, every calculated move they had made since appearing at my door. If they intended to play dirty, I required my own ammunition. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something compelled me to pick up. It was Penny. Her voice was small and bewildered. She said she had borrowed a phone from another child because hers was not functioning correctly. She wanted to know why I had not called her back. My heart shattered. I told her I had been trying to call, but kept missing her. She said Grandma had told her I was too occupied with work to speak, that I had said she should enjoy her vacation without worrying about home. I kept my voice steady and assured her that was not true, that I missed her every single second. She began to tell me about the cruise, but then I heard Patricia's voice in the background, sharp and angry. The line went dead. I called back instantly, but it went straight to a generic voicemail. They had found her and taken the phone. I stared at the ceiling all night, replaying scenarios in my mind. By morning, I had formulated a plan. It was not flawless, but it was a start. I would meticulously document every single action they took, every social media post, every prevented phone call, every falsehood they told my daughter. I would seek out others who had witnessed their true nature. I would build a case that even their money could not circumvent. Veronica returned early the next morning, exhausted from supervising 3 children all night. I showed her the Facebook posts and explained what had transpired with Penny's call. She shook her head in dismay and offered to provide a statement regarding Evan's concerns. It was a beginning. I drove back home that afternoon, utilizing the 6-hour journey to rehearse what I would convey to my lawyer, how I would present Evan's evidence, and how I would counter their inevitable attacks on my character. By the time I arrived at my apartment, I felt prepared for conflict. However, walking into my empty home, seeing Penny's breakfast bowl still in the sink from before she departed, the enormity of what I was confronting overwhelmed me. They possessed wealth, connections, and even my own mother on their side. All I had was the truth and a deceased soldier's warning. I sat at my kitchen table with Evan's documents spread before me. Somewhere out there, my daughter was being turned against me by individuals who perceived her as nothing more than a financial gain. The cruise would conclude tomorrow. They would bring her back. But I knew they had no intention of truly returning her to me. This was merely the beginning of their campaign to take her away. I picked up my phone and began making calls. First to Catherine again, leaving a detailed message about the urgency. Then to Penny's school, alerting them to the situation. Then to every single person I could conceive of who might assist me in this struggle. As the sun descended over my modest apartment, I gazed at a photograph of Evan, Penny, and myself from happier times. Before the divorce, before the deployment, before his parents revealed their true colors, I made a silent vow to him that I would safeguard our daughter, no matter the cost. The fight for Penny was about to commence, and I would not allow them to prevail. The cruise ship docked at noon the following day. I waited in the port terminal parking lot, observing families disembarking with their luggage and souvenirs. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then I saw them. Patricia held Penny's hand, while Richard pushed a cart laden with shopping bags. Penny wore a new outfit I had never seen before, complete with designer sunglasses perched on her head. I exited my car and approached them. Penny's face brightened when she saw me, but Patricia's grasp on her hand tightened. Richard positioned himself between us, explaining that Penny required rest after such an exciting journey. Patricia added that they had already made arrangements to take her to their house for a few days to help her adjust. I reached for my daughter, but Richard stepped forward, obstructing my path. The nearby security guard observed our interaction closely. I recognized how this appeared, a disheveled woman confronting a well-dressed elderly couple with a child. I compelled myself to remain calm and told Penny I would see her soon. Patricia's smile was triumphant as they loaded my daughter into their Mercedes. Back at my apartment, I discovered an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a formal letter from Patricia's lawyer outlining their concerns about my suitability as a parent. They cited my work schedule, my humble living conditions, and what they termed my erratic behavior during Penny's absence. The letter proposed mediation to discuss Penny's best interests. I called Catherine's office again. This time, her assistant answered and scheduled an emergency appointment for the next morning. I spent the remainder of the day organizing Evan's documents and creating a timeline of Richard and Patricia's actions since the funeral. Every detail now held significance. That evening, my neighbor Carol knocked on my door. She had always been friendly, often looking after Penny when I worked late. But now, she seemed uncomfortable, explaining that Richard had approached her in the building's garden area. He had been charming, asking about the neighborhood and mentioning his efforts to ensure his granddaughter had a stable environment. Carol admitted he had inquired about my work schedule and whether I frequently left Penny unsupervised. The manipulation was spreading like ripples, infiltrating every aspect of my life. After Carol departed, I checked my phone to find more Facebook posts from Patricia. Photographs of Penny's temporary room at their house, a space larger than my entire living room, adorned in pink and white with a canopy bed and matching furnishings. The comments lauded Patricia for providing such a loving environment for her grieving granddaughter. I observed Patricia's phone-checking habit in several photographs, a nervous tick where she glanced at her screen every few minutes, even mid-activity with Penny, like someone monitoring stocks or investments. The realization made my stomach churn. She was literally tracking her potential financial gain through my daughter. Catherine's office was located in a modest building downtown. She listened attentively as I presented everything: the insurance policy, the bankruptcy documents, Evan's letter. Her expression grew more serious with each piece of evidence. She clarified that while we possessed proof of financial motivation, family court would prioritize Penny's current well-being. Richard and Patricia's wealth would be perceived as an advantage, not a weapon. We discussed our strategy. Catherine advised me to maintain meticulous documentation of all interactions and to avoid any conduct that could be interpreted as hostile or unstable. She would file a response to their custody petition and request that all communication proceed through legal channels. The retainer fee made me wince, but I handed over my credit card, knowing I would max it out if necessary. Leaving Catherine's office, I drove to Penny's school. The principal, Mrs. Chun, greeted me with noticeable discomfort. She explained that Patricia had been added as an emergency contact at Penny's recent therapy session, which I had missed due to work. The therapist had recommended it for Penny's emotional security. I requested to review the forms and noticed Patricia's signature alongside mine, as if she held equal authority. The school pickup that afternoon transformed into a subtle skirmish. Patricia arrived in her Mercedes just as I pulled up in my 10-year-old Honda. Other parents observed the awkward exchange as we both approached the pickup line. Penny emerged, looking perplexed, glancing between us. Patricia called out that she had promised to take Penny shopping for school supplies. I firmly stated that Penny would be coming home with me. The teacher on duty appeared uneasy, checking her list. Since both of us were authorized for pickup, she suggested we resolve it ourselves. Patricia's voice carried across the parking lot as she reminded everyone within earshot that she had cleared her entire schedule to support Penny during this difficult period. While I had been too busy working to even call during the cruise, I felt the gaze of other parents upon me, some with empathy, others with judgment. I overheard whispered comparisons to my demeanor immediately after Evan's death, when grief had made it challenging to maintain routines. One mother murmured to another about how I had appeared just as unstable back then. The comparison stung because it was partly true. Those initial weeks after Evan's death had been a blur of barely functioning. Penny finally came to me, but Patricia made sure to give her a prolonged embrace first, whispering something that made Penny glance at me with apprehension. During the drive home, Penny was quiet. When I inquired about the cruise, she mentioned how Grandma had explained that Mommy was unwell when Daddy passed away, and that was why some of her memories from that time were confusing. The insidious influence was already spreading. That evening, I assisted Penny with her homework while attempting to act normally. She casually mentioned that her friend Emma had asked why her mommy was unkind to her daddy before he went to heaven. My heart sank. Patricia's version of our divorce was being disseminated through 9-year-old gossip networks. My phone vibrated with a text from the neighborhood mom group. Someone had screenshotted my response about protecting Penny from exploitation and shared it with concern about parental alienation. The group administrator suggested I might benefit from counseling to process my grief in healthier ways. I exited the group chat, knowing my departure would be noted and discussed. Over the subsequent days, the pressure intensified. My boss summoned me to his office to discuss my recent absences. He had received a concerned call about my stability from someone claiming to be a family friend. My request for schedule flexibility was denied, accompanied by a warning that further disruptions would result in termination. At home, I discovered Evan's laptop still had his military email access saved. Late one night, I logged in, aware it was a violation, but desperate for any leverage. His draft folder contained unsent emails to his commanding officer expressing apprehension about his parents' sudden interest in his finances. One draft mentioned their inquiries about his life insurance and benefits, dated just weeks before his deployment. The school contacted me about an incident where I had been observed photographing Patricia's car in the parking lot. Security had flagged it as concerning surveillance behavior. I attempted to explain I was documenting her presence for legal reasons, but the damage was done. Another mark against me in their records. My credit card statement arrived, showing the maxed out balance from Catherine's retainer. The minimum payment would strain my already tight budget. Meanwhile, Patricia posted photographs of Penny at an expensive children's boutique, trying on clothing that cost more than my weekly groceries. The caption mentioned how every child deserved to feel special during difficult times. Veronica called with disheartening news. Her husband had threatened divorce if she testified about Evan's concerns. His military career could not withstand association with a custody dispute that might attract media attention. She apologized through tears, stating she believed me, but could not risk losing her own family. She would provide the envelope, but nothing more. The isolation tightened like a noose. At school pickup, parents crossed the parking lot to avoid me. I overheard fragments of conversations about the unstable one and realized I was being discussed in a private social media group for school parents. My attempts to document Patricia's manipulation were being reinterpreted as obsessive behavior. During a supervised therapy session, the counselor asked Penny about her feelings. Patricia had arranged for me to be observed through a two-way mirror. I watched Penny describe feeling torn between two worlds, the exciting life her grandparents offered and the familiar but smaller world with me. The therapist's notes would become part of the court record. Richard's influence extended to unexpected areas. My friend Sarah sheepishly admitted she needed to distance herself from our friendship. Her daughter required expensive orthodontic work, and Patricia's husband's dental practice offered payment plans. She could not afford to be seen taking sides. Another ally lost to financial pressure. I began adopting Patricia's tactics out of sheer desperation. When Richard frequented the local coffee shop, I initiated conversations with the barista, learning his routine. I discovered he met with his business partner there every Tuesday and positioned myself at a nearby table to overhear their strained discussions about bankruptcy proceedings. One morning, I fabricated a dental emergency to visit Richard's practice. While waiting, I photographed billing statements left visible on the reception desk, displaying overdue accounts and final notices. The receptionist caught me and threatened to summon security. I departed swiftly, but the damage to my reputation spread through their professional network. Patricia intensified her psychological warfare. She filed an emergency motion to advance the custody hearing by 6 weeks, catching me unprepared. Catherine was on vacation, and her substitute was unfamiliar with our case. The accelerated timeline meant less time to gather evidence and prepare witnesses. During a particularly low moment, I discovered an old voicemail I had left Evan months before his deployment. In it, I complained about Penny being challenging lately and needing a break. Patricia had accessed Evan's phone and now possessed evidence of me struggling with parenting. My own exhausted words would be used against me. The financial strain overwhelmed me at the grocery store. My card was declined while purchasing Penny's favorite cereal. The ensuing breakdown, tears, trembling hands, fumbling for change, was witnessed by several individuals. To observers, I appeared unstable, possibly under the influence of something. Another piece of ammunition for Patricia's case. I attempted to record one of Patricia's threatening calls, but my phone died mid-conversation. She had noticed the recording notification before the battery failed. Now I appeared paranoid, claiming threats I could not substantiate. The mediation session that followed treated my accusations as desperate attempts to avoid losing custody. Penny's teacher, Ms. Martinez, had always been supportive. But after an anonymous complaint about her showing favoritism, she withdrew. She had 3 children to provide for and could not risk her job over involvement in a custody dispute. She would testify only to facts, not interpretations. The conflict consumed everything. I lost my weekend job when customers complained about the drama I brought to work. The owner apologetically explained that my personal situation was affecting business. I later learned my replacement was a member of Patricia's book club. Desperate for evidence, I used Evan's laptop to access shared photo accounts before Patricia realized they existed. The autocomplete feature revealed his last searches, emergency custody, and protecting my daughter. He had known this was coming and had attempted to prepare. I downloaded years of photographs showcasing our close mother-daughter bond before Patricia could delete them. Reading between the lines of Patricia's Facebook posts revealed inconsistencies in her timeline. She claimed to have been devastated by Evan's death, but her post from that period showed her at charity galas and wine tastings with no mention of her son's passing until after learning about the insurance. The truth about Patricia's presence at the hospital when Evan died emerged through a parking receipt I found among Evan's belongings. She had been there, but at a different time than she claimed. The manipulation ran so deep that even her grief was a performance for an audience. My investigation caused unforeseen collateral damage. The receptionist at Richard's dental practice was suspended after being blamed for the leaked financial information. Her husband threatened to leave her over her job loss and association with a crazy woman trying to destroy a grieving family. I watched her cry at school pickup, knowing I had inadvertently harmed an innocent person. Sarah finally posed a question that haunted me. What if I was mistaken? What if Richard and Patricia, despite their imperfections, genuinely cared for Penny? Doubt crept in during sleepless nights. Perhaps their concern was authentic, mixed with financial desperation. Perhaps I was the one causing harm by fighting so intensely. Evidence accumulated on both sides. I discovered bankruptcy filing papers in Richard's car during a school pickup, photographing them through the window. But Patricia countered by documenting every school event I had missed, every late pickup, every indication of financial struggle. The truth became a weapon that cut both ways. Evan's military comrade called after hearing about the custody dispute. He owed Evan his life from an incident during deployment, but would not jeopardize his career by testifying about personal conversations. He confirmed Evan's apprehension regarding his parents, but only in an off-record phone call that could not legally assist me. The revelation that shattered me came from Evan's military emails. He had been aware of his parents' financial difficulties before deployment, but chose to complete his tour nonetheless. He had been documenting their manipulative behavior for years, preparing for this exact scenario. However, the emails also disclosed that I had overlooked signs of his depression before deployment. I had been too engrossed in the aftermath of our divorce to notice his struggles. Patricia's lawyer filed papers suggesting my public accusations demonstrated vindictive behavior, unbecoming of a parent. The narrative shifted from me protecting Penny to me being unable to accept assistance due to pride and paranoia. Every defensive action I took reinforced their portrayal of instability. I realized the honest, trusting version of myself had to perish for the strategic, suspicious version to survive this conflict. I began thinking like them, planning moves in advance, considering collateral damage acceptable. The transformation felt like losing a piece of my soul, but it was the soul means to wage their war. During one exchange, Richard broke down in genuine tears over losing his last connection to Evan. The pain appeared authentic, piercing through his calculated facade. We had both been weeping at Evan's grave on the same day at different times, mourning the same loss while contending over its legacy. Everything hinged on uncovering concrete evidence of their financial motivations predating their interest in custody. I knew it existed somewhere within Evan's meticulous documentation. The military insurance paperwork naming backup guardians would be the crucial element if I could access it through proper channels. As the custody hearing drew near, battle lines were drawn throughout our community. Local business owners chose sides based on financial affiliations. The school community was divided between those who perceived Patricia's generosity and those who recognized manipulation. Even the coffee shop barista understood which side her tips originated from. I discovered Patricia now slept in Evan's childhood bedroom at their house, wearing his high school Letterman jacket. The lingering scent of his cologne still clung to his belongings. She had created a shrine to the son she had disowned, rewriting history to erase her rejection of him. Penny mentioned how Grandma cried while looking at Daddy's photographs, performing grief for an audience of one. The final pieces of evidence gradually came together. Bank documents showed Richard and Patricia had investigated Penny's insurance value weeks before ever contacting me. Their initial inquiry to a lawyer preceded their first visit to Penny. The timeline unequivocally proved financial motivation, but demonstrating it in family court would require more than suspicious timing. Patricia offered a deal. I could have a private farewell with Penny before her permanent placement with them in exchange for dropping the insurance allegations. The cruelty of forcing me to choose between truth and time with my daughter exemplified their tactics. My refusal was spun as not caring about Penny's emotional needs during the transition. With 2 weeks remaining until the hearing, I had assembled a case that unveiled the truth, but at a devastating personal cost. Former friends avoided me. My reputation was in tatters. My finances were ruined. But Evan's evidence remained solid, awaiting its day in court. The conflict for Penny had transformed everyone it touched, leaving scars that would endure long after any legal resolution. The military contact who owed Evan his life finally agreed to meet me at a diner near the base. He slid a folder across the table containing copies of Evan's official military paperwork. Inside was the irrefutable proof, insurance forms dated 3 months before deployment, listing me as primary guardian with specific instructions that his parents were not to have unsupervised access to Penny. The witness signature belonged to his commanding officer. I drove directly to Catherine's office with the documents. She examined them carefully, then made several phone calls. Within hours, she had filed supplemental evidence with the court. The timeline was indisputable. Evan had documented his concerns through official military channels, creating a paper trail his parents could not contest. Patricia's response arrived through her lawyer within 24 hours. They claimed the documents were fabricated, demanding authentication. Catherine offered a grim smile and scheduled depositions with 3 military officials who had witnessed Evan's signatures. The desperation in their counterclaim was evident. At school pickup, I noticed Richard's Mercedes had a parking boot. The coffee shop barista mentioned seeing him arguing with a tow truck driver about unpaid tickets. Their financial situation was deteriorating more rapidly than they could conceal it. Patricia's designer handbag had been replaced with a counterfeit, though she carried it with the same haughty demeanor. The deposition schedule compelled Patricia to miss several of her standing appointments with Penny. My daughter returned home puzzled about why Grandma had canceled their shopping trip. I focused on homework and normal routines, allowing Penny to process the changes without my commentary. She fell asleep on the couch watching her favorite movie, clutching the stuffed animal Evan had given her. Catherine called with news that Richard's business partner had agreed to testify. The man feared legal liability if he remained silent about the bankruptcy fraud. He would provide documentation showing Richard had concealed assets while claiming poverty to creditors. The intricate web of lies was unraveling faster than they could weave new ones. I arrived early for Penny's school play, securing front row seats. Patricia and Richard entered separately, their unified front beginning to crack. They sat 3 rows behind me. Patricia's phone buzzed constantly with what appeared to be urgent messages. Richard's hands trembled as he attempted to operate the video camera. During intermission, the school counselor pulled me aside. She had observed concerning changes in Patricia's behavior during recent visits. Agitation, repetitive questions about insurance policies, and comments about securing Penny's future that seemed more financial than emotional. She had documented everything in her official notes. The authentication of Evan's military documents occurred swiftly. His commanding officer testified via video link, confirming every signature and timestamp. The insurance company representative verified the policy details, including a clause Evan had added preventing any guardian from accessing funds without court oversight. He had anticipated everything. Patricia's composure fractured during a chance encounter at the pharmacy. She cornered me near the vitamins, hissing accusations about destroying their family. Her meticulously styled hair was disheveled. Her makeup smudged. The pharmacist watched nervously as Patricia's voice escalated, attracting stares from other customers. Security eventually escorted her out. Catherine presented our evidence methodically. Bank records showed Richard and Patricia had researched Penny's insurance value before ever contacting me. Their internet searches included grandparent custody rights and accessing minors' inheritance weeks before they had shown any interest in Penny's well-being. The digital trail was damning. Richard's business partner testified reluctantly, but thoroughly. He revealed Richard had taken loans against future expectations of family money coming in. Clear evidence they had been counting on Penny's insurance before they had even met her. The partner produced emails where Richard discussed timeline strategies for gaining custody. The guardian ad litem interviewed Penny at school, away from all parties. My daughter's honest confusion about her grandparents' sudden interest came through clearly. She mentioned how Grandma always asked about Daddy's special papers and whether Mommy had a safety deposit box. The guardian's report noted these unusual preoccupations. Patricia made a critical error by attempting to access Evan's military pension information using old passwords. The system flagged the unauthorized attempt, triggering an investigation. Military police contacted Catherine about potential fraud charges. Patricia's lawyer withdrew from the case the next day. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, reviewing Evan's letter one final time. His words about protecting Penny from those who would exploit her resonated more truly than ever. Inside the building, Patricia paced the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to secure new legal representation. Richard sat alone on a bench, staring blankly. The judge reviewed the evidence in chambers before calling us in. Patricia had managed to find a last-minute attorney who appeared overwhelmed by the case file. Richard's business partner sat in the gallery, clearly uncomfortable, but legally obligated to be present. The court reporter prepared her equipment as we took our positions. Catherine presented the timeline with surgical precision. Each piece of evidence built upon the last. Evan's military documents, their internet searches, the bankruptcy papers, the attempted pension access. Patricia's attorney attempted to object, but lacked valid grounds. The truth was too thoroughly documented to dispute. When confronted with their own emails about the insurance money, Richard finally broke. He admitted they had seen Penny as their only option to avoid bankruptcy. Patricia turned on him instantly, claiming she had been manipulated by her husband's financial desperation. Their united front completely shattered as they blamed each other. The judge ordered a recess to review additional evidence. In the hallway, Patricia approached me one last time. Her designer clothes hung loosely on her frame, stress having eroded her polished appearance. She pleaded with me to consider Penny's future opportunities. I walked away without responding. Catherine received word that criminal charges were being considered for fraud and attempted financial exploitation of a minor. The military took threats against service members' families seriously, even posthumously. Patricia's attempts to access Evan's benefits had triggered protocols she had not anticipated. The final hearing lasted 3 hours. The judge methodically dismantled every claim Richard and Patricia had made. Their financial motivations were established beyond doubt. The evidence demonstrated calculated manipulation rather than genuine grandparental concern. Even their therapy recommendations for Penny were exposed as attempts to construct a custody case. Richard's business officially filed for bankruptcy during the proceedings. Court officers served papers as he sat in the courtroom. Patricia attempted to distance herself, claiming separate finances, but evidence showed joint planning of the custody scheme. Their house of cards collapsed entirely. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. Full custody remained with me. Richard and Patricia were granted supervised visitation only, contingent on completing counseling about appropriate boundaries. Any access to Penny's inheritance required court approval with multiple oversight mechanisms. They were also ordered to pay my legal fees. Patricia wept as the ruling was read, but they were not tears of grief for a lost grandchild. She kept muttering about the money, seemingly oblivious that everyone could hear her. Richard stared at his hands, appearing older than his years. Their scheme had cost them everything: reputation, finances, and any authentic relationship with their granddaughter. I collected Penny from school that afternoon like any other day. She inquired if she would still see her grandparents sometimes. I explained they needed some time to reflect on their choices, keeping the explanation age-appropriate. She nodded solemnly, then asked if we could finally go camping for her birthday. The relief in her voice broke my heart. Catherine filed the paperwork to establish the protected trust for Penny's inheritance that day. Multiple safeguards ensured no one could access it for personal gain. The insurance money would fund her education and future, precisely as Evan intended. His foresight had protected her even from beyond the grave. The community reaction was mixed but swift. Some neighbors who had supported Patricia quietly apologized for misjudging the situation. Others maintained their distance, unable to admit they had been deceived. The school implemented new protocols regarding emergency contact additions. Small changes, but significant ones. I returned to work with a modified schedule my boss approved. After learning the full story, the financial pressure eased, knowing Patricia and Richard would have to cover the legal expenses. My credit cards would take time to recover, but the immediate crisis had passed. Normal life felt unfamiliar after months of conflict. Penny's therapy sessions now focused on processing the confusion of her grandparents' behavior rather than building their custody case. The counselor helped her understand that sometimes adults make poor choices because of money. Penny's resilience astonished me as she adapted to the new reality with the flexibility only children possess. 3 months later, Richard and Patricia's house went into foreclosure. They relocated to a small apartment across town, their country club lifestyle a distant memory. Patricia sent a letter requesting to see Penny for her birthday. The court-appointed supervisor would oversee the visit, ensuring appropriate boundaries. I found myself at Evan's grave on a quiet Tuesday morning. The headstone was a simple military marker, but someone had left fresh flowers, not Patricia's expensive arrangements, but simple daisies like the ones Evan used to pick for Penny. A small card read, "Thank you for protecting them," in unfamiliar handwriting. The supervised visit took place at a neutral location. Patricia appeared diminished, her designer clothes replaced with department store basics. She brought Penny a modest gift, a photo album of Evan as a child. For once, the gesture seemed genuine rather than calculated. Richard barely spoke, shame weighing down his shoulders. Penny handled the visit with surprising maturity. She thanked them for the album and shared stories about school. When Patricia started crying about missed opportunities, Penny simply patted her hand and changed the subject. My daughter had learned boundaries I had never had to teach her. The conflict was over, but its effects rippled through our lives. Trust came harder now. I scrutinized the motives behind every kindness. But Penny thrived despite everything. She joined the school choir and made new friends. Her laughter returned gradually, no longer forced or performed for anyone's benefit. One evening, while assisting with homework, Penny asked if Daddy knew his parents would try to take her away. I showed her the letter Evan had written, the parts appropriate for her age. She traced his handwriting with her finger and smiled. He had loved her enough to protect her from anything, even his own parents. The camping trip finally occurred 6 months late, but it was perfect in its simplicity. We roasted marshmallows and shared stories under the stars. Penny said she felt Daddy watching over us. I agreed, knowing Evan's greatest triumph was not in death benefits or legal documents, but in ensuring his daughter grew up with a parent who truly loved her. Richard and Patricia gradually faded from our daily lives. Their supervised visits became sporadic, then ceased entirely. They sent birthday cards that Penny politely acknowledged but did not cherish. The grandparents who had attempted to steal her future became a cautionary tale about greed destroying family connections. I returned to school part-time, taking evening classes to work toward a better future for both of us. Penny did homework alongside me at the kitchen table. We were constructing something new from the remnants of what they had tried to demolish. Not wealthy, but rich in ways that truly mattered. The insurance money remained protected in trust, accumulating interest for Penny's future. Every statement reminded me of Evan's sacrifice and foresight. He had given his life for his country, but also ensured his daughter's security against those who would exploit her grief. Years would pass before Penny fully comprehended what had transpired. For now, she knew only that some individuals had attempted to use her daddy's memory for negative reasons, but love had safeguarded her. That was sufficient truth for a 9-year-old to carry. Our small apartment felt like a sanctuary of normalcy after the storm. Penny's artwork adorned the refrigerator. Her laughter filled the rooms. We had survived the struggle for her future, preserving what truly mattered. Our family of 2, small but unbreakable, shielded by a father's love that transcended even death itself.